In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'll tell you the one trade the Pelicans have to make, and it doesn't involve who you think. It's the Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Tuesday, a game day for your New Orleans Pelicans as they take on the Chicago Bulls. More on them and Zach LaVine in the second segment of today's show. But we're going to look at the one trade the Pelicans have to make. One trade they have to do no matter what. We'll break it all down. It involves someone you don't think. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. I can't remember if I introduced myself in the beginning. I'm Jake Madison, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, here with y'all. We got a lot to cover in today's show, so we're going to kind of dive right into it here in just a second. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, become an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans. Listen Monday through Friday. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. So a lot of trade talk in today's show. Before a couple of player notes in the third involving Herb Jones and a couple of the two-way guys, not in the way that you might think. So let's get into the trades. The February 6th trade deadline is going to be here before we know it. And obviously the Pelicans, we know, are looking to move Brandon Ingram. But there's another move that they absolutely have to make that maybe doesn't involve Brandon Ingram. Right now, the Pelicans are in the luxury tax. They are over the tax by $2,111,937. So basically $2.112 million in there. By the way, that equates to a luxury tax bill of $3,167,904,000. So, pays a little bit more. This team ain't paying the luxury tax, especially for this team. 8 wins, which is what they have currently when I'm recording this. They're not paying the luxury tax for that. Maybe they'll never pay it, who knows? But definitely not for this season. So no matter what happens with Brandon Ingram, a deal for him or not, as things get a little bit tougher, this team is going to duck the luxury tax. They're going to make a trade that sheds salary. So it's complicated now. Because they're over $2.112 million, you can't just dump one of the minimum contract guys on this team. There's a couple of players that you could easily just be like, hey, we're going to attach a second-round pick. Detroit, the only team with cap space right now. Take them. They fall off your books in a year, no problem. Daniel Tice is one of those guys. Javonte Green was one of those guys. Even someone like Karl Makovich or Antonio Reeves is one of those players that are like minimum contract guys that conceivably before they could have dumped and it would have gotten you under the luxury tax. But here's the thing, $2.112 million over. Daniel Tice, who's making about $2.09 million. Same for Javonte Green. Karl Makovich is making 1.4. Antonio Reeves is making 1.15. None of those guys, just dumping them by themselves, gets you under the luxury tax anymore. The only player on a minimum deal that does get you under the luxury tax is Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who's making like just enough. 2.196970. So you could include him and do it and get under the luxury tax. And that's maybe what this team is still going to try and do. But there's another move that I think makes sense. And it's probably not a player that you were thinking about before. And that is Jordan Hawkins. Hawkins is making $4.525 million this season. It's a good bit of money, but his production just hasn't been really good this year. Now, he's dealt with a real bad back injury that's kept him out for a longer time than we would have hoped. And I'm not holding the injury against him or anything like that. But when you look at the stats, the scoring, all of that, it hasn't been particularly great. This year in 24 games, he's averaging 10.6 points per, but his 3-point percentage isn't great. It's 32.2%. And in fact, he only has 6 games this year out of those 24 where he shot above 40% from three. If you want to just kind of look at the numbers where you're like, okay, this guy is in good shooting form, it's 8 games maybe. He has one game of 37.5%, one game of 38.5%, but everything else has been 33% or worse. He's just not shot the ball particularly well this year. There's just no getting around it. You know, the one skill that he brings that's NBA ready is shooting. He doesn't add a ton in other areas. There's not ball handling from him. There's not assists from him. The rebounds are okay-ish at times, but not particularly elite at anything when it comes to it. So when you look at him and his situation here, I wouldn't say that he's a long-term piece or someone whose value is particularly high. Now, it might be because he's on a rookie deal, was a lottery pick. That can go a long way with other teams. And so if I'm the Pelicans, the way I'm looking at this is, if anyone's going to offer me anything of like decent to good value for Jordan Hawkins, I should probably take that, because this is a way you could shed significant salary for your team. You know, if you trade him away or just dump him into space, maybe someone offers you a lottery protected first round pick or something along those lines, and you know the amount of money he's making, and you just get that 4.525 off the books, you now have enough money to sign Brandon Boston Jr. to a standard NBA contract, take him off a two-way and put him on the active roster, which is something the team would like to do. If you just dump Jeremiah Robinson Earl, it gets you just barely under the tax. But then the second you sign Brandon Boston Jr. to replace him, and that's what the team would like to do, you're right back in the tax again, and you run into the same sort of problem. So the way to really fix this, get Brandon Boston Jr. on the roster on some sort of longer term deal that gets him here next season, is probably by trading Hawkins. And when you look at how Hawkins has played, yeah, maybe that's the move. Now, we'd like to see Hawkins play alongside Zion Williamson more and see what that looks like for him. But last year, he shot 36.6% from three. It's not bad. I wouldn't call it good for a guy whose NBA skill was 3-point shooting. And if he can't find a way to get onto the court, and a lot of this has to do with Willie Green too, and maybe not developing him as much as you'd like because of lack of playing time last season for him. I mean, it's just the situation, right? When you look at his stats kind of compared to the team, they're pretty unimpressive for most of them. And again, he's young. This isn't a huge knock on him entirely, but his defensive rebounding percentage, Brandon Boston Jr. has a higher defensive rebounding percentage than him. Elfrid Payton had a higher defensive rebounding percentage than him. Jamal Cain, in very limited games and minutes, has a higher defensive rebounding percentage than him. Those are all guards. You know, you look at that, you look at some of the shooting numbers or the 3-point rate. That's really where he shines, is most of his shots are 3-pointers. That number is particularly good, but the shooting numbers themselves, the field goal percentage, the true shooting percentage, which factors in that threes are worth more than twos, hasn't really done much to inspire confidence. So honestly, if you want to sign Brandon Boston Jr., add a little bit more depth to this team, the best move that this team could make might be just finding a way to dump Jordan Hawkins, or at least hopefully getting, a little something in return for him. But beyond just any sort of Brandon Ingram deal, CJ McCollum trade, anything like that, and we'll look at one deal with both those guys in the next segment here. Ducking the tax is the move the Pelicans are going to make. It's what's going to happen. It's the reality of the situation. Maybe Hawkins is the best thing. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Especially if it means you can sign Brandon Boston Jr. Let me know in the comments down below. So coming up next, the Pelicans play the Chicago Bulls tonight on the road. Zach LaVine make any sense for this team? At first, no. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I got a deal for y'all that's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Wayfair. After all the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC, and I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space can help me get back into a routine. So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need all within your budget. I know, because I've spent a lot of money there. Whether you're looking for furniture or whatever it might be. They have a huge selection, and it makes pieces easy to find that fit your style and budget. And my favorite part is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. And I love that their site's so easy to navigate. You can search by style, you can search by color, you can kind of find the size of the piece that you're looking for. Browse similar things till you find the exact right thing for your space. So give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's Wayfair, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans, because this is an important time when it comes to the franchise. It also means give the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter a read. You can sign up over at lockedondaily.com. to just scroll down till you see the Locked On Pelicans logo, sign up. You'll get it in your inbox every single day. So let's get into Zach LaVine and the Chicago Bulls. And Zach LaVine, I want to start with this. Zach LaVine is kind of an example of why you don't want to give Brandon Ingram, a max deal here. This is a good player. Zach LaVine's a good player to the point where he's probably actually underrated a little bit. Someone who's averaging 24 points per game this season. He's shooting 45% from three on 7.3 attempts per game, 4.4 assists, 4.8 rebounds. He's doing a really good job. He's being a go-to scorer. He's been capable of this his whole career. And he's under 30, which is still pretty good. It's kind of wild to think that he's been in the league that long and still isn't 30 years old. He'll be 30 very soon, though. So they're having trouble trading him because of the massive contract that he signed. This is what you see with NBA players now. Unless you are like a bona fide superstar, giving someone an insanely big max deal is really tough. Zach LaVine makes $43 million this year. No one wants to trade for that. They also don't want to trade for it because he makes $46 million in 2025 and 26. And then in the 2026-27 season, so 2 years from now, he makes basically $49 million, almost $50 million. He's a real good player, in my opinion. Underrated. There's a period where he wasn't worth all of that, but I think he's really started to come around and has done a really good job. This is someone for his career who's averaged 20.7 points per game. His 8 years in Chicago, 24.2 points per game, and he's a career 38.7%, so 39% shooter from three on pretty good volume too. Those are really great numbers, I think. The numbers this year that he's putting up are basically like right in line, other than the scoring being slightly up, for his career averages here. He's a good player. There's no doubting that whatsoever. So should he make sense for New Orleans? On the surface, no, because that money in future seasons could potentially really hurt their salary cap. But there is a trade that makes sense. And at first I was like, there's no way this would work or this makes any sense. No, it actually does. The deal is this: Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum for Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball. Now, I don't know if Chicago would actually do this. I feel like they might, but I don't really know. Depends on how they value Brandon Ingram. That's a bit of an issue here, right? They're only going to trade for Brandon Ingram if they want him, and they are planning on re-signing him. But to do that, at the minimum, it's going to be close to $50 million per season. They just went through this with Zach LaVine, and at the end of that contract, or halfway in, no one wants him, and are they then stuck in that position? Chicago's in arguably maybe the worst spot that you can be in the NBA, which is not a playoff team, but not a bottom five team. You're kind of stuck in no man's land here, which is not what you want. They're 18-21. They're the 10th spot. They're at the bottom of the play-in tournament. They got a cushion there over Philadelphia, but still, for this team and what you're paying for it, that ain't it, right? Like, that's kind of what it comes to, in my opinion, of like, yeah, no, like that's not a team that should be doing that. I don't know if they're in the luxury tax or not this year. Let me check on that. They're not. They have about $4.5 million before they get to the luxury tax, so that's good. That actually complicates the trade. So here's the trade: Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum for Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball. A little bit weird bringing Lonzo Ball back, but here's the rationale for it. Lonzo Ball's an expiring contract, $21.4 million this season. That comes off your books. That's basically the exact same kind of money that Trey Murphy's going to be adding on to his current salary. He's going to make $25 million next year. It's about a $20 million pay bump. You get $20 million off your books and an expiring deal for Lonzo Ball. That's actually not bad. Then you add Zach LaVine in, and him next to Zion with DeJounte Murray, adding kind of an elite create your own shot scorer like that, who shoots the three really well. I don't know. I'm a little intrigued by that idea. So this is a way of kind of threading the needle of getting the Pelicans salary cap relief next year and this year too. This sheds off about $5 million in their books. You probably, thinking about it, would need to take a minimum contract from the Chicago Bulls to really make this work, because they're going to then be in the luxury tax to this. So let's put Taylor Horton-Tucker on the Pelicans in this deal. It should still work. It does. Pelicans shed $2.8 million in salary here. Chicago Bulls stay under the luxury tax too. So no one is in the luxury tax after this sort of deal. There's something to be said for that, I think. And I think that's an important thing here. Zach LaVine becomes your second best player on the roster next to Zion Williamson. He's been pretty healthy recently, which I think is an important thing overall, minus last year where he was still working his way back from injuries and things like that. But he's been a fairly durable player since some injuries early on in his career here. So you look at him and you're like, oh yeah, I think that could be a really good fit. The 3-point shooting is there. The scoring is there. If you want to throw two at Zion, now you have Murray. Now you have Zach LaVine out there alongside Trey Murphy and Yves Missi. You can have a lineup of DeJounte Murray, Zach LaVine, Trey Murphy, let's say, Zion Williamson and Yves Missi at that point. You have shooting in there. You have scoring in there. LaVine at times has proven to be a pretty good defender as well. Overall, I don't hate the idea. You still would need to do some cap managing for next season, but you're in a much better spot than you would be otherwise, or if you would just re-sign Brandon Ingram, say to $40 million or more, which is what it would take. I don't love the idea of this, but I do think, you could maybe even get a pick from the Chicago Bulls, assuming, that they truly value someone like Brandon Ingram and plan on re-signing him. Again, I don't know if they exactly want to do this deal, but I think that could maybe have the makings of it. If you want to get a little crazy and throw the Pelicans deep into the luxury tax or something like that, you could take out Zach LaVine. You could put Nikola Vucevic on there too and take out Zach LaVine, take out Lonzo Ball and put Vooch in there. Could be an option. He would fit, I think, really well next to Zion. He's having a bit of a resurgence this year. I talked about trading for him earlier in the year, and a lot of y'all laughed, and then he ends up playing at a very, very high level this season. He's shooting, by the way, 43% from three. You want to stretch five, there you go, at 20 points per game alongside 10 rebounds. He'd look fantastic on this team right now. So you can still get that guy potentially. Now, you then need to sort out all sorts of salary cap stuff next year if you do that. If you don't get that $20 million expiring in Lonzo Ball, so I don't really know if there's a way to make that work. But there's the framework of a deal. When I do trades on here, I don't need to figure out, or I don't even try and figure out like every specific little thing. I just want to kind of get the basic framework down. And, everything else is then details. What are the main pieces? Why do both sides do this trade? If you can figure that out, minimum contract players, that stuff, that doesn't matter in the long run. That all can get figured out pretty easily. It's the core pieces that are the tough thing. And I think it makes sense here for both franchises to look at something like this. Do you like the idea of Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum for Zach LaVine and basically Lonzo Ball's expiring contract? Let me know in the comments down below. So coming up next, let's look at Herb Jones' injury and some interesting notes when it comes to some of the two-way guys. Antonio Reeves getting called back to the Pelicans. Is that a good sign? Not what you think. I'll tell you why coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by my go-to ticketing app, Game Time. Look, just going to events is fun. Being with the crowd, being around other people, finding people with things in common is a wonderful thing. The energy, the excitement is always there. And Game Time is my go-to ticketing app for live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. What I love about Game Time is all of the features. And now Game Time has made it even easier for you to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So whenever a friend wants to go to a Pelicans game, I tell them to get on Game Time because there's great deals out there and it's not going to waste your time. And if you're going to a venue you've never been before, they have the panoramic view from your seat before buying, so you know exactly what you're going to get. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Hungry Root. I love this. Look, when it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had a bit of a problem with it. And it's just, I don't have the time for all this between full-time job, Locked On Pelicans, going to games, life, just trying to eat healthier. You kind of get stressed out with all of it. You know, I'd go to the grocery store, buy things I didn't need, and then end up with no time to actually cook. So sticking to like health goals and things like that, it can be a struggle. But then I discovered Hungry Root when I was researching options to make my life a little bit easier when it comes to this. And honestly, it's been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping, recommend meals and groceries based on my tastes and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein, which is what I do, and gluten-free. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I don't like to spend a lot of time cooking. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to my door. And it's been a huge time saver and has made eating healthy so much simpler. So you're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. So for a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedonnba and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's hungryroot.com/lockedonnba. Code LOCKEDONNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/lockedonnba. Code LOCKEDONNBA. Do not miss out. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. That means you listen to Locked On Pelicans Monday through Friday. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And for your second listen, Mickey Loomis finally talked. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints was there. He's got the recap of the press conference. You do not want to miss this one. Loomis had some interesting things to say, both good and bad. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, making sense of everything black and gold. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's wrap up the show with a couple of just player notes here that I think is worth mentioning. Pretty light injury report for the Pelicans in this one. You have DeJounte Murray, who's listed as probable. He's most likely going to play. Out is Brandon Ingram. Out is Herb Jones, and that's it. That's kind of the lightest the injury report has been really in a minute here, and that's very exciting to see. On Herb Jones, he is out indefinitely. He's been basically injured all season long, so I hope he just takes some time to recover. You know, at this point, with all the games he missed earlier in the year, he just can't make, because the game's played rule, any of the all defensive teams, as great as it would be to see him on there. It's just not happening this year. It's a lost season. Take your time to get back, get healthy, Herb Jones. Don't rush back, even though I really want to see him back out on the court because he's one of my favorite players on the team. You know, he no doubtedly will return this season. He wants to play. He's not someone who's like, yeah, just shut me down and it'll be fine and I don't have to do any of that. He definitely wants to be out there on the court when it comes to all of that. So I think we'll see him again unless it's really that bad of an injury, but then you'd be looking at surgery, and we just hope that's not the case. A couple other notes here is the Pelicans recalled Antonio Reeves and their new two-way guard, Keion Brooks Jr., to the Pelicans here. One of the things I've been saying this season is it does need to be a bit of a youth movement. Play Antonio Reeves a bunch. See what you got in him. Give him that kind of experience that if you were fighting for the playoffs, you wouldn't really be able to get him otherwise. Look, same for Keion Brooks Jr. He's done really well in the G League so far. Go and get him time on an NBA court. See what they're capable of. Let him make some mistakes in a pressure-free environment, which is an important thing. Y'all actually made some really good points about that Zion 3 that I was nitpicking in yesterday's show. And you're like, look, It's a lost season. Let him take those threes, learn to do it the fact that he did is a good way. And I actually, have kind of come around on thinking of that. And I appreciate everyone who commented about that. Same for these young guys, play them. But I don't think that's going to happen here. The Birmingham squadron is actually playing the Illinois G League team, the Chicago Bulls G League team. So that's on Wednesday. This game's on Tuesday. If you're all basically in the same area, recall your guys, let them come around the team, sit on the bench during the game. Be in uniform, ready to play should the need arise. And that's that. And you don't need to really take them away. But I would imagine right after this game, they're going to go right back to the G League to play in that game on Wednesday. And we will not see them in New Orleans as the Pelicans take on the Mavericks on Wednesday night. That's just how I feel they're probably going to go about doing all of this here. So I don't think it's that full on youth movement just yet from this team, even though I think that's what they should be doing. As I've said, everything needs to kind of be about the future. Try and win some games here and there. I'm going to like that win against Boston, partially because Locked On NBA I do on Fridays now with John Krause of Locked On Celtics. So getting a win over his team would have been fun and a little bit of trash talk on Friday, but didn't end up happening. Thanks, Pels. But I don't think you'll see these guys kind of go with the youth movement. I think they'll go right back to the G League, but it's good to just get him time around the team whenever the opportunity arises, and this did. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense that that's what's happening here. So let me know what you think. Are you excited for this game against the Chicago Bulls? Do the Pelicans win? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game.